how to run for office. They had this booked at 7, so we're here for what we can be, and we can always meet again. I don't expect us to solve everything tonight. The original agenda that I put out, just because we need to get an agenda out, was that we would talk about reductions. I want to thank everybody for their time who either came or met with Dr. Cummings on our meeting Tuesday, so we do not have to rehash because everybody is up to speed. So we can move on from that. And what I would recommend is maybe we brainstorm with some ideas on what we can, what our thoughts are as a tri-committee. Obviously, we don't really have any power, but we're here kind of representing our own committees. And I know nobody's had a chance to actually meet. FinCom hasn't, school committee didn't take any action, and select board hasn't met yet. So again, I want to caution the public that this tri-committee is more just kind of a meeting of great minds, trying to talk to one another and go from there. So hopefully it won't be a big waste of everybody's time tonight, because I know timing's tricky, right? We just had this meeting Tuesday, select board meets next Tuesday, FinCom hasn't met yet, and school committee really hasn't. We didn't vote to take any action or anything either. We just digested a lot of information. So that being said, I'll open it up.
So,
Mr. Haddad.
yep, thank you. So Angeline and I had the opportunity to meet with Jay yesterday to go through a bunch of numbers. I'm sorry I wasn't there Tuesday night. I was actually dealing with the same issue in my town. We're grappling with the same types of issues that you're dealing with here in Grafton. So I'm very comfortable with the budget that Jay put together. I've had the opportunity to go through it, look at the numbers, understand the issues, understand the impact of a $1.5 million cut, understanding that last year, to help bridge the gap, a lot of one-time revenues were used to balance the budget, to keep the services where they are. And I think maintaining the services is where we need to be within the school budget. I have great faith in the numbers that Jay has presented to the school committee. So my feeling is I think we need to really investigate the possibility of having the select board call for an override and let the voters decide if they agree with those numbers, because I trust the numbers that Jay presented yesterday. And I know, Angelina, we spent over an hour with you yesterday going through the numbers, and I really have confidence in it, and I don't want to see a downgrade in the education level of the schools. I think it's important to maintain that. So I would like us to at least explore voting or going to a meeting and talking to the select board and asking them to really consider putting in a ballot question, whether it's for a 1-year override or a 3-year override. I think I had suggested at our last meeting to look at a three-year gap,
Yeah.
a 3-year outlook. So that's my feeling, just from looking at the numbers. And on the finance committee, Evan presented his budget to us, and I've had the opportunity to go through the ClearGov numbers as well. I met with your largest department head yesterday with the biggest budget. Have confidence in those numbers as well. I don't see a lot of fat in these budgets, and I've been looking at municipal budgets for over 40 years. So that's that Boston accent again, Mike.
Got it.
I love
I can
it.
imitate that.
So I think both Jay and Evan have done a really good job putting together preliminary budgets. Obviously, the finance committee hasn't met to go through the individual department budgets yet as a group, and I know we're scheduled to meet with you, Jay, on the 19th, I think.
Yeah, I think they
And you're coming in on that Saturday when we have that meeting. So, we're going to be going into more detail into the budgets, but just the preliminary look, I'm very comfortable and confident in the budgets that have been presented. And I think they're in the best interest of the residents of the town and the students that go to our school district. That's my feeling.
So, sorry, did other people have, yes.
So during the FinCom meeting that we did a few weeks ago, maybe I don't know, I've
Probably a
lost
month
total
ago.
track of time at
Yeah.
this point. The last FinCom meeting, Evan, you had presented 3 different scenarios with not very specific numbers, but just sort of a overall, like we can try to bridge this year using more one-time funds, hoping that new growth will come in and catch us up. I know that when we were looking at Jay's numbers yesterday, there's a big deficit in 26 and 27, but when you get out to 28, it's not that big. So it kind of, to me, looks better than it has in the past, and I don't want to be hopeful for the wrong reasons, but you know, looking at these kind of big deficits in the next 2 years, but then as you go, and I know it's hard to predict 5 years from now, but it does seem like that gap is closing as we move down the line. And is that because of new growth, or is that, I know it's kind of just like a big question, but I'm trying to wrap my brain around, like, are we still, do we still think we're going to be in a position in 3 years of likely needing another override for the schools, short of something drastic happening on the state level? Or is my read of the smaller deficits in future years like something that's happening within the town that we're somehow able to cover the increases better a little farther out? I know there was a lot of question there, but
Yeah, can you repeat the? I think it's probably a question. You want to go, or do you want me to start?
You start.
I think that our revenue projections, as far as what we we've talked about this. They're a moving target.
Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of growth on the table, but not a lot of shovels in the ground. We've got revenue projections for UPS, but there's a TIF attached to that, so that money's 3 to 4 years away of getting even the 50%. And so I think the numbers look better, in my opinion, from two perspectives. One is I think that we're going to continue to see growth, and I think that the municipal side, as long as we can get health insurance to stabilize a little bit, we'll see a little bit more of a shallower trajectory of growth. And I don't want to speak to the school department side, but it's maybe if you want to talk about why you think it's rosier in 3, 4, 5.
Kind of twofold. I think along those lines, we're not adding, we're looking to remain stable. In the forecasting, which Evan and I were talking about earlier this afternoon, I think we've done really good work with 8 million different forecasts. I think now that we have more actuals from the contracts, on the municipal side, they have a better sense. We still don't have the state numbers, but a better sense of revenue. Our next step is to, I'm guessing, we're going to look at those 3 different pathways that have been talked about and basically map them out. So in some of the forecasting that we've used, our needs on the school side drop off because of reductions.
Right.
So if we don't bring people back and we're 30 FTE down, obviously our needs cost-wise are lower in the future, but the quality of the product is
So
substantially.
that's why in the 4th year, you project a smaller deficit because you're
In
gonna have
part.
less people.
In part, so it's a combination of that and what Evan talked about on the town side. But if we're not adding back, obviously,
so does that mean that the $1 million in the second year, or whatever it is, it's not exactly 1, but it's like 1.5, what is it, 1.2 or something in the second year?
that's not adding back.
That's not adding
That's
back.
further reductions.
So
That's why, okay.
if we were going for an override, then just like, so that I can wrap my brain around it, it wouldn't be the 1.8 and the 1.2 or whatever it was, 1.5 and 1.2. It would be something else.
No, if you had the full 1.8, that would work. If it's fully funded all the way through, you're not taking into account, like, that works.
So the reduction, if I understand the numbers, Jay, that you showed us yesterday, you had a 1.5 deficit this year based on the revenue projections that you would have to cut from your budget. With those cuts going into next year, you would have an additional $1.2 million reduction, and then another
300.
whatever that was in the 3rd year. So it's a total of $3 million shortfall over the 3-year period with the revenues
Yep,
that Evan is projecting.
correct.
Yeah.
If you
Without-
don't have that $3 million and you make those cuts, then you have a very small deficit in year 4 because
That's right.
you don't have anybody. You have 50 kids in a classroom and there's
Correct.
less than, okay.
So I'm going to say something that's nobody's going to like, but here's the thing. Like, if let's say we do a 3-year override to keep level services, if revenue doesn't increase in the town of Grafton, Grafton is, and I know people don't like to hear this, as things are currently override dependent. So unless the state makes funding changes or we reduce what we serve, we would probably need like another override. It doesn't stop. I hate to say that, and hopefully things will change and all these things, but unless a lot of income comes in or the state formula changes or we reduce, we're override. Like this 3-year override doesn't just fix the problem forever.
So
You
part of
can't-
that
I'm
is, if I may, yeah, thanks.
Sorry. Yeah, and I do like an open discussion. I
Yep.
think I said that first time.
It's going to go to the town, likely. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would anticipate that more people need to vote on this than fewer. I'd be fully in support of that.
I agree with
The question is, what are you presenting to them? And,
Right.
you know, and you know, it's funny, for me, I've kind of wandered around this because I've been through 2 layoffs in my career, because I've been in those discussions kind of on the fringe on the other side of laying people off, and because I know the pain and it's just tough. It's brutal. And what does that bring the service of the organization? What does it do to the organization? So I see, personally, I really do see all sides of it. In some instances, there were compromises, nuanced solutions. It wasn't just this or that. It was this and that and a little something else. And can we try this? What do you think about that? Pay freezes, hiring freezes, pay cuts, furloughs. You know it all of it. And I wonder, I should back up and say that Amy Morris said something here the other night, and I want to echo her sentiments that people are digging into this and trying really, really hard to do the best they can on behalf of the residents of the town. You might like what one person says or thinks, but I think the team, the group of people that are elected to work on this together, I actually think we really are. And it's good to be a part of. We need to keep doing that because there could be some nuanced solutions here. I thought you did a really nice job, by the way, of presenting a reduced budget. And when I looked at it, I thought, okay, we're done. And then when I came home, I thought, wait a second. That's not going to be perfect if we go with a reduced budget and don't ask for an override and live with the consequences. Because the schools are not only important for students and for teachers, but it's also important for the value of the community, property values, the whole thing. So I'm totally on board with that. The flip side of it is this would be our 3rd ask of the residents, and I've been asking Evan about this a little bit. What about those people on fixed income? You're squeezing blood from a stone, and what are you telling them? Sorry, do it. You've paid into the system for decades, and even though you're not taking anything from the system, you just have to do it. That's easier for some people that are working.
It's hard.
And it's hard to be that person that confers that obligation on other people.
Right.
So could we talk about something that's nuanced? There's positions in here that are positions that you're targeting to hire, but not people that you would eliminate. They're just not positions now.
Right.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Before we just
This
go
really
with the
goes-
full 1.5 override, it's done. Because here's the last thing I just want to say on that. I don't know this for sure, but you might be taking your chances of a no vote.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And
No, the odds
do you
are
want
always-
that?
Right.
Yeah.
Could you, and what you could tell the town is, we are all fighting our hearts out, working together, trying to scrutinize, get to a level of detail where we keep a level of services for the schools, we keep people employed, we're rocking and rolling, we're doing good stuff, and you got to give a little too. Sorry, got to give a little too.
Everything you just said, Mark, I don't know who was here for that first override. Oh, Laura was. Okay, you probably remember we had not just tri-board, but the 3 committees met in the GHS library. And everything you just said, that was kind of the sentiment. We landed somewhere where it wasn't like perfect, but it was, and that we decided to do 5 years. I can remember that. And it was basically, could the schools live with X? And I remember saying, thought it was a good line, like, we're going to take any light preserver. We're not going to be like, oh, that's pink. We're not taking it. But it was done in unison, and there was back and forth and nuance. That was, I think this last one was also
In progress.
COVID. It was just, the spirit was probably there, but what you said mirrored exactly what we had with the first one.
I promise I'm not.
We did the same thing in
Steal
the
that.
second one. We did the
Yeah.
same
We
thing. We're all
probably
sitting in this
did. I
room.
remember it
Whoa,
more
wait,
clearly.
yeah.
Okay.
I remember
All
that
right.
meeting.
If we're gonna talk over each other, we're gonna have to go to the damn Madam Chair, which I really don't like.
Thank you,
So
Madam Chair.
please just be. I know, but Christy's trying to speak, and then I do want to circle back because I have lots of thoughts that you probably aren't gonna like. But go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, so I've met with Evan, I've met with James multiple times to go over the budget, and I would like to see, as to piggyback on to Mr. Alamo, a third option. I know that the override amount that we've seen has decreased, but as I met with Evan today, it seems that that has not come from the school making concessions, rather, as much as the town, correct? Am I wrong in what I'm saying, Evan? And that the town, the number that the town, that the school has asked for has been 48 million consistently, as we talked in your office today, right?
That's what I'm carrying.
Right.
in
Yeah.
the
48.
reduction.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So is there a way that the school could make more, could make like an option C? As I even spoke with
I
you.
think that's,
So is-
100%.
is there-
That's really the three options that Evan's been talking about, and it takes a meeting like this, sorry, Madam Chair, for
Please call me
that to
Laura.
be discussed. If we're gonna look for that middle ground, it's good to get some basic parameters, is that, I come up with the school committee, I don't know, 750,000 and meet in the middle, but we would obviously need a little direction from the boards as to, is it $50,000, is it 700, you know what I mean?
So, Dr.
But we could do
Cummings,
that.
I guess I want to caution you and Mr. Alamo that I understand what you're both saying, and I don't disagree. I do disagree that it is I think it's outside of your purview. It is the school committee's job to look and see what, it's not your job to say, I don't want you to eliminate this. I think you should eliminate that. And I don't know if that's what you were recommending.
No,
If
no,
you
what I'm-
have
yeah.
suggestions, Christy, you need to bring them to the school committee, and as a group, we will discuss them, and we can come up with that. But I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, that this is what the TRICOM is for. I think we're here to represent, because what we were trying to do originally was eliminate having all of us in a room, and maybe we need all of us in a room. I've found those to be hard, but maybe everybody wants to have a voice and be there, and I'm all for that, and we can get our chairs together and let's make it. But I understand, yep, we can raise more funds. I know you have plans, but I haven't seen them, and we need to talk as a committee and make different recommendations to Jay, because that's our job. If you guys have fabulous ideas, then submit them to the school committee. It's not my place to sit here and be like, yep, instead of French,
Yeah.
we
Well-
should cut this and we should raise fees here, because I'm a representative of a committee.
Yep,
Does
Madam
that
Chair,
make sense?
I appreciate that. I wasn't saying one specific thing over another. I was saying that it could be, it's a bit of a gamble here to go to the town and ask for this, and if we get a no, then it's just that, and then it's all that. Before that happens, I'm asking Dr. Cummings to consider, as part of the TRICOM, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. I think I'm supposed to ask, can we consider, and you did have a middle ground, Evan. There was, combination, override, combination, some reductions that were not incredibly painful, that were, potentially acceptable and okay. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe fees. I'm not going
Yep.
specific. I'm just thinking high level.
Yeah, and then I would make sorry, Angelina, I would make a recommendation, and that, yeah, if the select board again came back to us and said, we can give you an additional 750,000 and you need to reduce 750,000, then we can be creative on what we choose to reduce. And that, that's a great compromise. But again, we're being told we have this certain amount of money, and then school committee is like, okay, so we're reducing by $1.5 million, and that was one presentation of Jay's best thinking, of what he thinks we should recommend. And perhaps others have different ideas on that school committee. So yeah, Mark, you're on the select board. If you could come up with additional money for us, I think we would be happy to do that. I don't know if we can do. I just don't know if you can say tonight, hey, you know what? We're going to make some cuts on and I think the committee would love to see a little more push and pull also. Angelina, I'm sorry.
I just think that it needs to be put out there that the school budget, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is for level services. So by cutting anything, we're going to be impacting services. Adding fees, I was there for the discussion, that's a different story, and I don't think it has a very significant impact. It might be more for how it looks and what we can say, which I'm not sure exactly the value of that or how you quantify that versus the impact. But cutting from the school budget as it is cutting from level services. So I think that that just needs to be understood, where it's like, oh, we could take it from here and it might be less painful, but it's still going to impact students and it's still going to impact services.
Mark, for that.
So, back to the purpose of this, the six of us here.
Yeah.
I see this as we can work together to make a recommendation to the larger bodies, to the school committee, to the finance committee, to the select board, on a path that they might want to consider moving forward on, right? So Evan had presented three options, I believe it was three options to the finance committee on how to go about addressing this, as you were saying, a combination of things. If we have a few minutes here right now, I'd like, if you don't mind, Evan, going through those to understand what that is, so that we can probably weigh in on what we think the best option is to recommend to the select board, because like I said at my opening remarks, I've been through all the budgets, and I know you said he's adding some positions, but that's to maintain the services where they are right now, and they need that growth in a couple of areas. Maybe now's not the time, maybe they have to cut back on that, but I'd like to hear from Evan on those three options that you presented, and let us debate that, and maybe we want to make a recommendation back to the school committee and the select board saying, the TRICOM looked at this and we think this is the path forward you should go, and then you can make decisions and evaluate the impact on the school budget and the municipal budget on a preferred option. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thanks, Mark.
Do you mind? Am I putting you on the spot? Do you know what your options are?
No, but no. Well, they've become different, right, as we continue to move and the numbers change and all that stuff. But by and large, it's this. One is do nothing, right? That was an option. It doesn't seem like anyone's on board with doing nothing, so I think you can probably put that to the side. The other option was to go full override for whatever that deficit amount is, whether it's 1.8 or 2.1 or whatever it gets decided on, compounded out for 3 years, 5 years, whatever that is. And then the middle ground, at least as I see it being today, is a combination of reductions, probably some stabilization, and some other maybe creative solutions that get us to close that gap. So if we're talking about, let's say, that middle ground, and I'll just use the numbers that the number that Jay just said, say it's the school department needs to find $750,000 in reductions. The town needs to find $250,000 in reductions, and you need to use $500,000 in stabilization. That gets you there, right? Then you're done. And I think I'm echoing what Jay said earlier, is that it would be, if that's the direction that we're told to go, we'll figure that out. I mean, that's what we do. Yeah. But we need that. We like that direction, and even if this group says, well, that seems like a good direction, we're gonna say to the select board and the school committee that we recommend that this is the direction we head. We'll start working on that post haste, right? We're not gonna wait until all the different bodies.
Yeah. To weigh in on
Sure.
that, if that's an option that's worthwhile, we need to understand, what does a $750,000 reduction look like on the school side?
Right.
What does a $250,000 reduction look on the town side? The problem with using that $500,000 stabilization, that got the school department where they're in the problem now by using those one-time revenues
Yep.
last year. So I don't know if we want to repeat that.
Right.
So I guess I like what you're saying. So I think what I would like to recommend, if we can do this, is that let's look at that 750, 250, 500,000, see what that looks like. But then I also want to look at what happens if we, is there something else we can do, not using that 500,000? Is there a way that the schools reduce Y and we still go for an override? Because that reduction that you're talking about this year causes more reductions
Correct.
next year because your revenues aren't changing.
Yep.
And I don't think that's a good path to go forward, but I think we need to understand that. And I think the select board needs to understand that, because they're the ones that have to decide whether or not to ask the voters for an override, not the finance committee, not the school committee. It's the select board's call.
And just to be clear, I mean, that's why we have those options,
Yep.
right? It's that servant leadership model. So we present the options, and you, the voting members, picked which one you think is best in the best interest of the public. So you could very easily do the, and we're talking about just the numbers that we just were talking about. So
Understood.
750, 250, and $500,000 override, or 750 and a 750 override, or any other combination thereof is essentially on the table. We just gotta see what direction people wanna head in, and that's what we'll do. But and I think I've worked with Jay long enough now, and he's worked with me long enough now that we both know that if it's 750 and I find 50,000 or our revenues go 50,000, that reduces what Jay has to cut. You know what I mean? Like
Understood.
we have that
It's a good
running.
part.
Yeah, we have that running. It's not. I mean, it's not a great position to be in, but as far as us having the transparent conversation of, hey, state aid came in a little bit better. I can probably get you an extra 50,000, 75,000 to move over to your side of the budget. Does that help? And where does that help? And we're constantly having that conversation. So I think that, again, just the general premise is what would help us, lock in the plan.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So, if our purpose is to discuss those three options, personally, that option that you just said, I would go down that path. I don't think, based on talking with people in the town and such, that at this point, $1.5 million for 1 year, for the first year, 3.7 over 5 years, is attainable. I think that you might be better off to kind of get what you can versus getting nothing at all and see what we do from there. Another point I'd like to add and question the members of the committee. We've heard 3-year override, 5-year override. Dr. Cummings and Evan, what is a better type of override for you? What would your recommendation be if you were to 3 versus 5?
We might have very different answers on this in terms of, in my world, 5 has served us very well. The 3 sounds like a long time, but you blink and it's there.
Right.
5 has, it's just worked really well on the school side.
Yeah. Personally, I like a 5 because we're no sooner done and we're starting again.
Yeah, and people go, we just had an override.
We just had an override.
And every time we have an override, we have to educate. I mean, I'm
Right.
seeing it again and again, and maybe you're facing, we're talking to different people where, people just, rightfully so, it's super confusing, but, we have to go through and again explain how we're not overspending, we're, the 10th, all the
Right.
things that you all know, but we have to explain to people that don't live and breathe this. I know there's some positive thinking that the funding mechanism may change. I think it takes longer. Again, government super slow, and we don't know what Grafton's going to pull from that. I mentioned to my husband. I said, you guys, we can always have it, and you can not tax people too. We have the thing, and you set the tax rate every year. If we absolutely suddenly maybe don't need it in year 4, the select board could say, hey, look, we don't need it. I mean, I know people don't believe that would happen, but it could.
Right.
Matt, do you have something? Welcome.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late. So if we were to go for a 5-year override plan, for example, and things did break our way, I would love for it to go 7 or 10 years, right? So I think that would be the scenario that we would be looking at. Is that
Bless you.
the drawing from the levy and drawing from the excess levy capacity is not something that has been done lightly, I know. And each year, these two guys are agonizing over how much we can reasonably draw from that excess levy capacity with full knowledge that we had made a commitment to a certain number of years. And I think that's how we ended up where we did last year, where there was a consideration of use of stabilization funds, which typically wouldn't be done. So, I think I agree with you, Christy. I think
Right.
For this guy, the 5-year horizon as a plan, I think is a really good one. My further thought on that, though, is we have been a couple of times in a situation where 5 years out, people after a year or so lose sight a little bit of the 5-year plan, and that's something that we just as a town need to be better at communicating. that actually we're on plan when we're drawing the 237,000 this year from the excess levy capacity. Here's where we're at. I know that those things have been communicated,
Right.
but we continually find ourselves in a situation where people feel like, oh, we just had this, and how come you guys haven't fixed the budget? It's not correct thinking. We're actually right on plan, but I just think it's something that that would be less of an issue if it was a shorter time frame. If it was 3 years, then we would have a very immediate sort of discussion, because we'd have less excess capacity. So I'm not advocating for that, but if we make the decision to go for a longer one, I think we need to work on the
Yeah,
communication piece.
I agree with you, Mr. Often. My concern, more so even with the 3-year override, as Mrs. Often was saying a moment ago, is we've no sooner done it and we're starting again. And this is not at no cost. I mean, it's costing Dr. Cummings hours and hours, and Kathleen Longarini. It's a lot of time, and time is money, as we all know, to prepare for an override. And if we keep doing this, that's money not wasted, but it's money spent that we have to keep doing every really year and a half, because it's been a year and a half Dr. Cummings has been speaking about this upcoming override, you know.
Yeah. I think, I guess, and I think what's, is just knowing what we still don't know what the cost is. So like
Right.
5 years, what does that sound? Is that more, like, we don't know what it is to the taxpayer. I can't figure that out. I don't, but I bet all of you could.
We can do that.
What's the number?
Well, yeah, they need a
Right,
number.
like, I
Is the
don't-
problem.
Right.
So at year 5, 3 million is $444 on the average residential tax bill, and 3.5 is 519 at the end. But it's not immediate, because you don't use the entire capacity year 1.
Right.
Evan, that's
yeah.
additional on top of the normal 2.5%
Correct.
increase.
Yep. That's
Right.
that's specifically what the
The added
override
is,
costs.
okay.
Yep. And obviously any variation thereof, you let me know what you want to see, and I can do that. But
Yeah.
I
thanks.
in preparation for this conversation looked at 3 and 3.5 just as benchmarks to pull off of.
Yeah, I'm curious. Just, I know I feel like you guys started with the 3. Mark, you said the 3. Could you share your
Yeah, my
thoughts
thinking.
behind that?
Yeah, my thinking on the 3 years, there's a couple of reasons for it. One, forecasting out 5 years is a really difficult task, because you have no idea. There's union contract negotiations that happen within that 5-year period.
Yep.
Most union contracts are 3 years, so you know what the plan is, so you can plan for it better, and the forecast is better. The other reason I was in favor of a 3-year is because there aren't any shovels in the ground, but there's a lot of plans that may come to fruition, which may extend the 3 years out to 5 or 6 years, so that you're not killing the taxpayers over a longer period of time. So my thinking is you plan for what you can really give a good solid forecast on, because those last 2 years are guesswork, and it's very difficult to predict it. And if you're off on those, then the people are going to be saying, well, why did you tell us you needed this and it didn't work out that way? When you can have a much better plan at 3 years. That's where I came from, Laura, on the 3 years.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we're at 6:34. I feel like we should be done at about maybe 6:55. So we have about 20 minutes left. And I know people are probably like, what are we doing? So, I mean, I'm sorry to put Matt and Mark on the spot, but I really feel like you guys are kind of in the hot seat, because your board is going to need to really make that difficult decision. So what do you need from us? What kind of guidance? What are you looking for? And I don't know if you know this yet, to help you. It sounds like, I understand Mark's, I think we all love a compromise, right? I mean, I think I can speak for all of us. Nobody's like, woohoo, I want an override, but I also don't want my schools to fall apart. Like, so what do I want more? And that's the question I would ask the constituents. But what do you guys need? And is that a fair question to ask right now?
Sure, it's a fair question. Did you want to go, Mark?
Sure. Option C, something like that. Something that is that considers some reductions that are as responsible as possible, I can't speak to the fees because I know that that's a difficult one, and that's probably a smaller amount of funds or funding that would support that. And then maybe an override that doesn't look like 1.6 or 1.5 million dollars. I think we can probably have a reasonable conversation with reasonable people about an override and a 5-year override. Agree, I totally agree with you. It's hard to predict. But given an option of looking at spreading that money over a longer period of time and reducing that pain when that bill comes, is probably something that I favor. It's my consideration. Doesn't have to be that way. It's just my thinking. So I guess is option C is what it would be.
So,
Thanks, Mark.
I'd like to just ask the question, I guess, because I'm not too much in favor of a reduction in service levels. What would be the implication if we, similar to what we did last year, just filled the gap with stabilization totally, instead of doing reductions in stabilization? And I guess this is mostly to Evan. If we're going to use 500K, instead of doing that in reductions, what if we were to do 1.5 out of stabilization? And the only reason that I'm sort of really exploring that is because I know that our free cash position this year was much higher, to the tune of $1 million or so, higher than historic, something like that.
Yeah, we've done in the last 2 years really well on free cash. The reason that I would steer people away from using that entire, no reductions, use all stabilization, is that you have not filled that hole at all. That hole's going to remain there. So now we're the full nut plus next year's difficulties, right? So it's pushing you're going to push the override conversation off a year, but have also made no adjustments towards maybe making the hole a little shallower, right? I don't know why I'm using that as the analogy, but that's what we'll go with.
Yeah, no. Works.
So, whereas if we do a combination of cuts and a combination of stabilization, override, whatever that other component looks like, I think it gives us a substantially better horizon on year two. Gives us a lot smaller of a nut to crack if the override is not successful, if we've got to make further reductions or we've got to get creative in other ways. We're not now at 2.4, we're at whatever the number now happens to be, right? So that's kind of, that's how I think about it, is just that, you know, and there's another component too that let me just explore. So you can use stabilization to fill gaps in your budget, but you're also supposed to, in order to maintain your bond ratings and all those other things that go into it, you're supposed to backfill that within a reasonable amount of time.
Yep.
And I think it's 2 fiscal years from when you removed it, but take that 2 years with a grain of salt. It might be when, but we can do that with $500,000. We can do that with 1.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
It will just be a big impact.
Is that where we're at today?
What do you mean?
1.8?
Sorry,
With unemployment, it would be, yeah.
Okay.
that
All right.
Yeah.
made me nervous there for a second. Like, where did I get 1.8?
Madam
I'm
Chair.
just starting to just throw out decimals. But so those are my concerns, and so it's protecting the town's financial interests as well as kind of just trying to take a moderate approach. I mean, my approach to everything, and I think Jay's approach to everything is to, you know, you got to show your work, right? So show that you've done all of the steps you could have done, and still we can't close that gap. That's just kind of, I think that's a basic premise of what we should be doing.
Okay. I'll be
Oh.
quick.
Yeah, Mark also, he's asked to go next. So if you
Finish,
want to
Mr.
directly, if
Upton.
you need to directly respond, thanks, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, just to clarify one thing though, I guess in my mind I'm thinking, and this wouldn't be solely my idea, I've heard these ideas. It wouldn't be cutting people that are working now. it would be looking at possibly not hiring people just yet. So when you say cuts, I know that you're referring to that as a cut in service, but it's not taking, it's not unemployed, it's not taking someone out of a job.
We would. The impact wouldn't be 10.0, but yeah, we would add those, at least 2 of those 3 requested elementary school teachers for class size and have some unemployment. It's not going to be 10, and that's a positive. But
Okay,
I would expect we'd have some unemployment.
okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't where my head was at, but whatever that is,
That'd
that's,
be a heck of
that's
a
it.
lot better.
But it could be fewer
question.
and
Oh,
then
yeah.
override.
I-
I'm not a huge fan of that last part though, Mr. Often, Evan. I taking from the, the stabilization
Oh,
fund,
okay.
that's a tough, robbing Peter to pay Paul is
Because it
not
just
a-
comes back and bites you in future
Right.
years.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't love it. We're gonna need it.
So just to be clear, I hate that idea.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put it out there, I get you.
But if it was a little bit,
I just,
maybe.
I'm interested in what are all of the options in
Yep.
terms of maintaining level services, and that just happens to be one of them. I don't like that idea either. I do think generally some reductions that are tolerable with an override would be probably my preferred option. So I'd prefer not to use stabilization at all. We've already sort of done that, and so that's where we are today. We've had to add that money onto the additional deficit that we have this year. So yeah, I think that I'm in agreement with you, Mark. The sort of some reductions, sensible reductions with an override component puts us in a better situation.
So I
yeah.
guess my concern in general is really next year as well, like is huge. And I know I've heard from people, and I'm gonna do exactly what I didn't want you to do to me, Mark, is I think we'd also love to hear some reductions on the town side too. Like, it feels like a lot, obviously it's a big budget, but are those coming up? Is there reduction of services that can come from all over? I don't know, cause that's not my job and I don't pretend to be, but if we're gonna be, cause yeah, we could make those reductions at the top half that were, maintenance and those things that don't affect people, but affect us long-term. And I will caution everybody that Grafton did that for years and years and years, and that's partly why we've become where we are today too. We have, for a long time, didn't maintain our buildings. For a long time, we didn't pay our staff what they needed to pay. And we had a very different mindset, and then that helped to get us where we are today. So I don't wanna go back thinking, yep, we'll make, I understand, like, yeah, we can make some cuts, sure. But next year, we're gonna, the problem isn't solved, we're just kind of putting it off, and I love to put off a problem as much as the next girl, but it's still gonna be here, and it's gonna be bigger and more expensive, so. I'm interested to hear, like, okay, we need a number, like, is it, okay, you guys now need to cut $1 million versus $1.5 million, and okay, we'll save these, or is it, do you feel, or am
I would anticipate, probably jumping ahead, but if part of our marching orders is to find that something in that middle ground, Evan appropriately throughout 750, 250, and 500, but,
you would do all 3 of those, is what you're telling me?
oh yeah, but, well,
No.
but variations of each, like those weren't like magic numbers that are now cemented in stone.
Of course
Like,
not. None
what
of
would
this
it
is
look
all-
on the school side if we cut 850, 750, 650, 550, 450? What happens to us as a town if we use more stabilization, less stabilization? Like almost a menu that could be balanced and considered.
Right.
So,
Do you know
so I think if the question is, again, we'll just keep using 750, 250, 500.
Yeah, and then now it's locked down.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Now we have to do it. But let's say those are the
Sorry, that's your job.
Just we need to have some numbers to talk about. So let's say those are the numbers. So if you were to reduce by 750, and then let's say we did override or stabilization or whatever that is for $500,000.
Mhm.
Do you have an idea of what that would
Mhm.
be compounded at year 5?
The key question is, what gets added back, if anything?
Okay.
It's a game changer in terms of the overall number if you're not adding it back in year two. It's hard being with relatively low funding to reduce and not be adding things back, but that's the answer.
Gotcha.
Mark.
I've been doing this a long time. Once you cut,
It,
it takes years and years and years to put it back. So if we're gonna look down the road for reductions, I don't wanna do it in year one. Let's look further down the road and see how much of an override. So I'd like to make a recommendation to the select board and the school committee to at least consider. I'd like to look at either a 1 year override or a 5 year override. And the reason I'm saying 1 year is you can figure out that 1 year number could be low, because you look at you can make a couple of reductions in what you have right now that won't impact the long-term viability of the district. So maybe those 2 teaching positions, we don't fill those, we don't go for those this year. So maybe instead of needing 1.5 to get us through the gap for 1 year, it's 1.3. And then maybe some of that stuff that you're talking about, the shovels do get into the ground, you do get some more growth, and maybe next year, a 3 to 5 year override isn't as bad as it was, right? So that's one option to look at.
Yep.
Look at the 1 year, bridge the gap. Maybe the state fixes the problem, maybe new growth comes in, and we're not looking to kill the taxpayers and the voters for a long period of time. You're looking at me, you got to.
I am.
Yeah.
My mind is a little. Yeah, I trust you so much, Mark.
Thank you,
So
thank
I
you.
appreciate your comments, and I'm also a 1 year override does not at reduced rate when I still am looking at next. That does.
What I'm saying to you, I guess I didn't say it
can't hide
the
my
right way.
face.
No, I know, your face is perfect, but,
Hear that?
and I'm sure Matt agrees with that statement. So,
I second that.
Everybody does. Thank you.
but what I'm saying is, there's a lot of things that are in works right now. There's a group at the state called the 211
Oh, yeah.
group. They're looking at changing the formula. It could help the town of
Yes.
Grafton down the road.
Agreed.
It could happen within the next year. I don't know. I like to be optimistic, Laura. I like to be optimistic. But what I'm saying to you is, there's a lot of things that there are permits in this town that may come to fruition. So why lock in a long-term override if you don't need to do it, right? But we know we have a problem in fiscal year 26. It's a $1.5 million problem. I don't think there's a lot of fat in the budget. I think any cuts you make is going to be a painful cut.
Yeah.
To either the municipal side or the school side. I've looked at the numbers. I don't see them as livable. If it's a livable cut, it shouldn't be in the budget in the first place. So don't say a livable cut. A cut is a cut. If it's in there, it shouldn't be. If it's a livable cut, it shouldn't be in your budget. I don't think you have any livable cuts. So what I'm saying is, do a 1 year override, see what happens down the road. It sort of kicks the can down the road, but things could change in a year. You could have a bunch of things hit the ground that really helps the town. You could have a lot of growth in 1 year. So I think the 2 options that we should recommend to the select board, 1 year and 5 year. I've talked myself out of the 3 year after listening to this conversation. So that's what I would like to see. I would like to see a 1 year override, and I'd like to see a 5 year override. I'd like to see what those numbers are and lock those numbers down. That way the select board knows the numbers, they know the impact to the voters and the residents and the taxpayers, and then they can make an informed decision. That's what I would like to recommend.
Christy, and then we're at 6:49.
Yeah, we're at 6:49, so that's why I wanted to say, Laura, we are at 6:49. We have 10 minutes left in this meeting, so I would like, we seem to come to an agreement on 5 year versus so that's off the table, the 3 year. But we were talking more about that hybrid type method, right? And I feel that Dr. Cummings and Evan need some direction in which to go in, because we're kind of all over the map at this point. As a committee, I don't know if there would be a vote or whatnot. Could we agree on something actionable for them to come back to us with that we all agree on at this point?
So I think we got 2 options. We have the 1 5 year override, and those are numbers, right? So put the projections together and play it out in terms of how that would go to the taxpayer over the next 1 to 5 years.
Yep.
And then I think the other one is come back with a recommendation on what are those livable cuts in combination with a tolerable amount use of stabilization money.
So are we, though, giving direction and saying, okay, Dr. Cummings, let's see what it would look like if you had 750 in cuts versus 500 in cuts versus 250 in cuts? We need something, right? not just say it's a 5-year override, if we're going with that option 3, right?
I interpreted 5-year override and 1-year override as level service.
100%.
Level
You
service.
You interpreted that right.
About
C,
something
right?
different.
You're
Yeah, I'm
talking about
C.
Mark's option.
I'm talking about
option
the,
C.
Right.
yeah, Evan's other option,
Which
option
is-
C, which we were talking for a
So
while
Mark,
about.
what do you feel like you need? I think what I would be comfortable with in terms of that, option C is, in these guys' estimation, what do they consider to be tolerable cuts?
Mhm.
That would be in combination with stabilization.
But should we be giving them
No,
more of
I
direction
think
now?
we should just give them the latitude that they need as professionals to just come with us, to say, if we're forced to do this, option C, this is what we think it looks like. And let them balance out town side, school side, and stabilization to the best of their sort of thinking. And I think I don't like that option too much, but
You gotta see it.
that's where we're at.
Yeah.
We have to see
We
what
have
that
to
looks
see it,
like.
yeah.
yeah, we have
And I
But
think the
also-
important thing is, I don't like any of the cuts from last night. I don't like getting rid of those guidance counselors that we've been begging for ever since I've been in town. We finally
Right,
get
yeah.
them, and now we have to get rid of them. I don't like those sorts of things, but we have to understand that for that option C, what does it actually look like in terms of actual cuts for the schools in the town, and then we can make our decision.
Yeah,
Do you want a motion to move this forward?
I think Angelina had
Oh, I'm
something to
sorry.
say. Did
No,
you?
I just think that, and the impact of what the cuts are,
Yeah, of
because
course.
as we've talked about, I don't think that they're, like, anything is gonna impact services or longevity, and, so clearly, I mean, I know you are good about that, but we definitely, with that number, would need exactly what the impact is, so that we understand what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, I think a motion makes things nice and clean, and that way we.
Do it right under 755.
right.
So
Awesome.
I'd like to make two motions. So the first motion is I would like to move that we request from the town administrator and the school superintendent what a 1-year override and a 5-year override would look like dollar-wise and impact to the taxpayers. That's my first motion. At level service.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, and then the second motion would be, I would like to move that the school superintendent and the town administrator get together and prepare a scenario that uses a combination of reductions and use of one-time revenue sources to balance the budget in fiscal year '26. Because that's the only year you're gonna do that. You can't project cuts in future years. So it'd be for fiscal year '26. I'd like to see what those cuts would look like.
I'll second that with just a slight amendment.
Go ahead.
We understand what that payback looks like too.
Correct.
That Evan talked about. We
Yep.
need to replenish that stabilization. So maybe 3 years out, what does that look like for
Sure.
the next? Yeah.
Evan, does that make
Was it-
sense?
Was it stabilization or override to fill that
Yeah,
gap?
hang on, yeah, can I jump in, Madam Chair? I
Wait,
think that's
Motion
what
made and seconded. Further discussion. Here we
further
go, just
discussion,
for
Mark,
Amy.
my head was, I think you just said it, my head was some as tolerable as possible, sensible, those are the words I'm hearing, just, cuts.
Okay.
A small amount of stabilization, which we don't want to do, we'll see what that is, and some form of an override.
For just that 1 year?
For
Just
the
for five-
5 years.
For the 5 years, okay.
That's what I
All
was
right, I'm
thinking,
fine with that.
all
That's-
three.
I would accept
So
that.
you're,
Gotcha.
everybody's,
Yep.
it's not perfect, but perfect doesn't get in the way of good.
So we're gonna see full level service under the first motion, and then some sort of
Reduction.
combination over the second motion.
Yeah, for 5 years.
Makes sense?
I think that's, are you
Wait,
good with
so
that?
they're
good with
cutting services
And
in
asking
the
people to pay more.
first year, but still doing an override for 5 years?
No,
Like,
you,
basically, instead of asking for 3.7 million over 5 years, what would it look like if we asked for 2.5 million over 5 years?
Correct.
Because we reduced services,
Yep.
and we did this, like, we're showing that we're doing everything we can, and we're asking for as little as possible to kind of do a bare bones, service, level service, not level service, but a bare bones service.
bare bones. I like that. I'll accept those amendments to my motion.
Phenomenal. All right, motion made, amended. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, if you gentlemen have questions on that, motion carries. If they're not even listening to me. Mike,
We're done with
Classic.
you.
wait. Before we close, I'm gonna float our minutes, because we just got them an hour before to the next meeting. Jay and Evan, if you could just give me your attention for 5 seconds.
What?
Timing on all of this, so I know it's wonky, right? You guys, I know people want this to happen faster, and I think you can see we're working hard. So do we want to just wait and then I'll check when we need to have another meeting and do that?
How much
or-
time do you need
How
to
much-
put those scenarios together?
Like an hour?
So timing
like,
I think
wise,
they're there
By the end
now.
of the League of Women Voters,
By the end of next week, we can have it done and it will be
I think we
awesome.
should target, the select board meeting is on the 18th, where we have our budget discussion. So if
we have to meet before that.
if we can meet with that in hand before then
Awesome.
we'd be in good shape.
Okay, I will email. Do you have a?
No, I wouldn't talk about it.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you all.
That's good. Good job.
All right,
Motion to
You had a
adjourn.
tight
meeting adjourned.
Thank you.